Well, welcome back. Assalamu alaikum. You are listening to Your World Today here on Radio Islam International. My name is Anisa Isak. Well, they say no one can predict the future, and that's because there are so many aspects of our lives that are at the mercy of various factors that usually make it out of our control. Our jobs and therefore our livelihoods can also take a knock when businesses have to deal with restructuring or even closure as a result of an economic crisis, or as we've seen recently, the pandemic. This is the point where employees have to consider retrenchments, which can have severe emotional, financial consequences for employees and their families. We are going to be speaking to attorney Aslam Moolla. He's one of South Africa's leading authorities on labour law and holds a master's in law at the University, or from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. His firm is Moolla Attorneys Inc. Sana Pirzada is an HR and IR practitioner. She specializes in retail HR ops, but has multiple industry exposure as well. And she holds a BCom degree from the University of Witwatersrand with a double major in business science. Brother Aslam and Sister Sana, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to Radio Islam International's Your World Today.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure, Sana.
Wa alaikum salam, Nasira, and assalamu alaikum to the listeners. Thanks for having us this afternoon.
It's a pleasure, and I'm Anisa with you this afternoon. So, Sana, maybe we could start with you, and if you could just quickly give us a rundown on what exactly retrenchment is.
Okay, so Anisa, simply put, retrenchment is a no-fault dismissal. I like to refer to it as a no-fault termination. So your employer is basically letting you go, not because you have committed an offense or a transgression, or even your performance, your work performance is not in question, but rather due to an operational requirement, your employer is contemplating retrenchment. Now, retrenchment falls under Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act. An employer needs to follow a specific checklist before an employee can be retrenched. So, for example, an employer cannot just say, okay, I've decided to retrench 5 of you, and this is the decision I've made. So Section 189 heavily regulates how this retrenchment procedure needs to be run. The employer has to invite employees to meetings, also known as consultations, and the employer needs to get the employees' buy-in with regards to the contemplated retrenchment. Now, the decision, Anisa, to retrench cannot be a unilateral one taken by the employer only. And basically, you need the employees' buy-in in the process. And the key word here, or the key process, is your retrenchment has to be based on an operational requirement.
All right. So maybe we can get Brother Aslam to explain to us what exactly is a company's operational requirements.
Thank you, Anisa. Essentially, when you're looking at the words operational requirements and what it means for people in their positions who are going through retrenchment, essentially, the company has only 3 grounds for retrenchment. Number 1 is financial, number 2 is technological, and number 3 is structural. What these 3 grounds mean is that a company can only select one of these 3 grounds when they are contemplating retrenchment, as Sana has indicated. In other words, if a company has to retrench somebody, they can only select one ground, and typically in practice what we see, it's usually financial or structural. In other words, a company says, we don't have enough money to keep continuing the way we're doing, we have to let you go. Or we can't have 2 people performing the same functions, we have to let one person go. And that essentially is the definition of operational requirement.
All right, I think that clears it up very nicely for us. So then maybe you could also tell us why it's so important to remain calm during this retrenchment process. How do you handle this process correctly so that you don't find yourself sort of getting into a situation where you're going to make yourself sick physically as well as mentally during that time? That's
a very valid question, Anisa, and I think it is a challenge also. Someone I'm a specialist labor lawyer, and I can tell you the people that come to the office, one thing they are is not calm. And the reason why is because they've got bills to pay. Bond, car, school fees, groceries. How are they going to afford their expenses if their income is gone? Although the flip side is, if you're not in a calm state or you're not thinking rationally about the way forward, then you're not going to be able to come up with solutions. Now, as Sana has indicated, retrenchment is a no-fault dismissal. So you haven't done anything wrong. The company has to let you go. But what I can point out is, in addition to being calm, there are 3 things that you must get from the company. Number 1 is severance pay. Severance pay means that the company has to pay you by law a certain amount of money because they retrench you. It's not a lot of money. It's 1 week for every completed year of service. So if you work 5 years, you get 5 weeks. And also you must ask for your UI-19 form. That's the second thing. The UI-19 form is the form you take to the UIF to get your unemployment. And the last thing is you get your documents relating to the retrenchment. So in summary, it is difficult to remain calm because you're being let go. You have all these expenses, but worry, doubt, anxiety, that's not going to help you. It's going to keep you up. It's going to affect your health, and you're not going to be able to think logically about the scenario. So the best thing actually is to get your documents from the company, sit down, discuss it with your family, come up with a plan of action, look at different avenues, options, and take it from there.
All right. So now maybe you could take us to the steps that are necessary to take after you've been retrenched.
So as Aslam mentioned, you are entitled to claim for UIF benefits as a retrenched employee. You should ask your employer to complete a UI-19 form and a UI 2.7. So it's a UI-19 and a UI 2.7. Both these forms need to be signed and stamped by your employer, and your employer only completes these forms. Make sure it doesn't have any alterations or scratches, because it will be rejected by the UIF, and that will obviously prolong your claim period. Now, as an employee, you've got to also obtain a UI 2.1 form. It is an application form, a UI 6A form, which is basically your banking details and your payment form. This form can be obtained from the HR department, or your employer can print it out for you, or alternatively, you can get it off the internet. What you do with these forms is one of 2 things. You can apply for these benefits through visiting a labor center, or you can file an online application via the U-Filing portal, which is www.ufiling.co.za, and it is a self-service portal. You upload all the documents and your application goes through. And as Aslam mentioned, you've got to post-retrenchment, you've got to stay positive, and you've got to apply for jobs. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier on, there is a checklist which employers need to follow. And one of the questions on that checklist is, what form of assistance will the employer provide to the affected employees? And at this point, the employees can even suggest some sort of life coaching, business coaching, counseling, even post-retrenchment. So if you're going to be retrenched on the 1st of October, if your employer can pay a service provider right until December, so that you can basically have, a positive mindset, and you can get the coaching and basically don't lose hope whilst you are waiting for, a job to come by.
Yes. Okay, so that's quite interesting, because I suppose it gives you a bit of upskilling whilst you're waiting, as well as a little bit of a gift from your employer.
100%, Anisa, and especially the business coaching. So I think that's vital. Employees should actually push for that, as opposed to only running behind a certificate of service, which really doesn't have a lot of value compared to, business coaching or life coaching or counseling.
Yeah, All right, Aslam, where can one publicly post CVs? I mean, is it still something that's done today?
It's a good question, Anisa. Look, I think today's market is a bit challenging, considering that we've come out of COVID, or coming out of COVID. personally, I find that posting of CVs is not as effective as networking.
Yes.
Now, in the past, networking was done physically, although today with modern social media that we have, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, these are places where other people are, and participate in discussions. Get engaged in the different workplace groups, put your name out there. For example, if you specialize in a particular industry, then you can start a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel. It's called Legal Leaders South African Labour Law, where we post things about labour law, different topics of labour law. I think the old days where you got to go out and shake people's hands, that doesn't really apply now. It's still applicable, but with COVID and all these regulations,
yes,
take part in the online economy. That's the long and short of it. Participate in the online economy. Plus, it can open opportunities for you across the country, not just in your particular town or city.
Definitely. All right, so finally, maybe, Sana, you can tell us more about the role of referrals to your next job. Because we're networking, I suppose getting to know someone could mean they would refer you to somebody else?
100%. So as I mentioned earlier on, Anissa, retrenchment is a no-fault termination. So whilst the retrenchment process is carrying on, and once you've basically deciphered that your contemplated retrenchment is now a guaranteed retrenchment, employees at this stage should request written references from their line managers, second line manager, and in fact the highest manager in the organization that can attest to your work performance and your work ethic. Alternatively, if your employer can directly forward your CV to his network or to prospective employers, that would hold a lot of weight in terms of a credible source of reference, and basically your employer is stepping into his network, his or her network, by directly forwarding your CV. I mean, that would be an ideal situation for a job seeker. Always, and in terms of references, always list referees who you reported to. Avoid listing co-workers on your referee list, because they can't really comment on your performance and your effectiveness. So avoid listing co-workers as your referee, and always keep your referees as people that you've reported to.
All right, I think that's a good tip for people to follow if you are looking out for work, whether you've been retrenched or not. Well, Jazakallah khair for your time. I think between Sana and Aslam, we've learned quite a bit with regards to retrenchment. It's become a reality for many people, so I think it's a topic that is well worth listening to, and we do appreciate your time, both of you, Brother Aslam Moolla, who is a leading authority on labour law, as well as Sister Sana Pirzada, who specialises in retail HR ops. Jazakallah both for your time.
Thank you, Anissa. Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Anissa.
You're welcome. Assalamu alaikum.